So I get asked all the time, can I carry my loaded handgun on my own property in my residence? I get this question all the time, so I thought I would put out a quick video. So although I am a licensed and practicing attorney in the state of California, this in no way is legal advice. I always recommend you look into the legal codes for yourself. This is just going to be some basic foundational information. We're going to look at some of the penal code and some of the case law that's developed around this. But every situation factually is different. Do not think just because there are some general rules and guidelines that will apply to your case. So real quick, before we jump into this video about carrying your firearm in your home, on your residence, on your private property, I would like to thank USCCA for supporting the channel. USCCA provides carry insurance, legal protection, and I would say if you're considering carrying a firearm in your home, on your residence, on your private property, or if you have a CCW, I always recommend that you have some sort of legal protection, and USCCA provides the best legal protection in my opinion. I'll go ahead and pin a comment down below and also put a link to USCCA in the details. Generally in the state of California, the rule is that yes, you can carry a loaded firearm on your property if it is your own residence, you own it, it's your own private property. If it's your own property, you can carry a loaded firearm on your property. There are some caveats, however. And so specifically for reference, the code that kind of dictates this is Penal Code 25605, and this was Penal Code 12026 prior, so depending on if you're looking at some case law or some other things that involve this specific legal issue, you might see one of those codes. So this penal code expressly exempts a homeowner or a renter from the law which penalizes individuals from carrying a loaded firearm. If that individual is carrying the firearm in their home, if the renter is carrying the firearm in the area that they rent, then this Penal Code 25605 kicks in, and you are not violating California law by carrying a loaded firearm. So real quick, I'll just read to abbreviated, and I kind of trimmed down the language of 25605 because there's a lot of extra mumbo jumbo that's added into there, but I trimmed this down. No permit or license to carry, either openly or concealed, shall be required of any citizen of the U.S. or legal resident over the age of 18 years who resides or is temporarily within this state who carries either openly or concealed anywhere within the citizen's or legal resident's place of residence or on private property owned or lawfully possessed by the citizen or legal residents any pistol, revolver, or other firearm capable of being concealed upon the person. So under this penal code, essentially what it's saying is if you're over 18, you are lawfully allowed to have this firearm in the first place. You are allowed to have that firearm, carry it either open or concealed. It can be loaded in your place of residence or on your private property. So a lot of people will stop their inquiry there, but there has been some case law that's developed around this issue that we need to dig into a little bit deeper, because there's this issue of quasi-public versus public property, public access property, common areas of specific properties. Like if you're a renter, there may be some common areas, and the questions might arise whether you can carry the firearm in these common areas. So there's been some case law that's developed around that, so we need to take a look into what exactly does that say. So the general rule and what's developed in the state of California is, let's say you have private property, and let's say, yes, it is your private property, but carrying a firearm is prohibited even if it's your private property, if there is open access to the public. Like if you allow the public to come onto your private property and you have public access to it, then this law in the state of California says that you may not be able to carry a firearm concealed in those situations, because then your property is no longer technically private, it is kind of quasi-public because you have granted the public access to your property. So in this sense, even though the property is privately owned, it does not necessarily mean that the property is then not open to the public or public property in a sense. And a good case for this is People v. Overturf. So in this case, the court held that common areas of an apartment complex was a public place, and therefore Mr. Overturf could not carry a loaded firearm. Even though Mr. Overturf was the landlord of the apartment complex, he was lawfully allowed to be there. I believe he even owned the apartment complex himself. But since there was this, public aspect to it, there was public access and there was a common area, he could not carry his firearm in this specific scenario because it actually wasn't private property anymore. And it wasn't just his property because he allowed access to the public and the other renters into this common area, and therefore he could then not take his firearm, his loaded firearm or his concealed firearm. I think in this situation it was even, he had it open into this common area. And to throw an even further wrench into this, there is some other case law in the state of California, and the case that I'm going to cite to is People v. Strider, which kind of hits on other boundaries of your private property or other boundaries of your residence. So in this specific case, the state of California, or actually the appellate court in the state of California, found that the front yard that was surrounded by a fence and a gate was not actually a public place, and therefore this individual could not be held criminally liable under Penal Code 12031, which is having a loaded firearm in public. And so in this specific situation, this fenced-in gated area was still considered part of his private property, part of his residence, and therefore he was allowed to have the firearm in these areas. And so the court kind of summed this up, said that the reasonableness of detention turns on whether the people established at the suppression hearing that the fenced front yard was a public place within the meaning of the statute. We can conclude it was not. So here they said that this fenced-in area of his property was not public. It was still part of his residence. It was still private property, and therefore he fell into the prior penal code language that we were discussing prior. But the general rule in the state of California is if it is your residence, if it is your own private property, then yes, you can carry a firearm loaded, concealed, or open within those areas. You do not need a CCW. You don't have to meet the CCW requirement, and you should be insulated from the penal code because there's this other carve-out in the penal code language that allows you to take these sort of actions. Practically, should you be walking around in your front yard, waving a gun, brandishing a gun, flaunting your gun, stuff like that, when there's public people around, stuff like that, my general recommendation is no, don't do that. Don't think that you still won't have the police called on you. And even though you are allowed to carry a firearm in your residence or in the surrounding areas, maybe it's a fenced-in area like we talked before, this still doesn't mean that you won't be arrested. You will still have to go through probably the legal process and prove that you were in the right carrying your firearm, on your private property in your residence. But you're still going to be arrested. The police are still probably going to be called and you're still going to be arrested. Now, you're all adults. You can make that a decision for yourself, but I would recommend you don't do that. Just be smart about what you're doing. So that's just some quick information on a question that I get asked all the time. If you have any questions, go ahead and write in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer the best of my ability. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to support the channel, the best way to do that is to join the Patreon, and I'll put a link to the Patreon down in the details. Another way you can support the channel is using the various affiliate codes also found in the details. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, a nation that draws a great distinction between its scholars and its warriors, while if its laws are written by cowards and its wars fought by fools.